All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome to our PRAM Central August chapter meeting. We're so happy to have all of you on here, and I know we'll have other people joining us, but I wanted to go ahead and get started. This morning, I'm going to go ahead and make an announcement on behalf of Mara Hartman. She is our career development coordinator, but Mara, as many of you know, works for Energy Corporation. So as you can imagine, she is a little bit busy right now with all the pending storms and everything going on. So she just asked me to let everyone know if there's anyone still interested in obtaining your APR. PRSA and the Universal Accreditation Board are actually trying to make it easier on people right now. They're being a little bit more lenient about deadlines, and they're also allowing people to do the panel presentations and also your exams with virtual options. So now is actually, if you do find yourself, some people are busier than ever and some people actually might have a little more time on their hands. But either way, if one of the things you were concerned about was getting to a lab to take the test or making those panel presentations, there are virtual options there. So if you have more questions about the panel presentation or about anything concerning getting ready for your APR, Mara would love to help you. And if y'all want to, if you're interested, you can just comment in the chat and I'll make sure to get with you and get her information to you. All right. And Jean Cook, our Vice President of Membership, is going to give us a short little update on new members.
Well, thank you. Let me get it up here. We are still getting new members joining, which is great. We're coming up on our membership meeting, which will be in October. But since last time we met, 2 people have joined from Fahrenheit Creative Group, Carrie Nash and Amara Johnson. I don't see them on this call, so hopefully we'll get to welcome them at one of our next virtual meetings.
Awesome. Thank you, Jean.
Welcome.
All right. Bonnie Jackson, who is on our board as our members at large, has a project that she is excited about. And so I wanted to give her just a moment to share a little bit more about that with y'all.
Good morning, everybody. I really am excited about this project. Let me first apologize, though, because I am not with the video because I keep getting this message that my internet is unstable. And it kicked me off in my earlier class, so I'm coming on just on audio. I apologize for that. Hopefully we'll have that corrected in the future. I'm really excited about the mentorship program. Constantly, my students are asking about people who are doing what they want to do. And it dawned on me that we have a ton of experience in PRAM. I mean, just exceptional people doing exceptional work. And so what I want to do this semester is start to do an interview process that we can record people talking about themselves, the jobs that they have, and the work that they do. And I want to have students conduct the interviews so that students can ask the questions that we as seasoned professionals may not think about asking. And I'd like to then use those recordings and kind of spread them out and share them with colleges and universities in the PRAM Central area and others if the PRAM organization is okay with that. I'd like to, the one last thing I'll say is I would like to pull students not just from Jackson State, but from every college, a person who wants to interview someone. And we'll be contacting people to see if you're interested in doing an interview and then pairing you up with the students and setting those interviews up so that you can share your wealth of knowledge with the new group of people who are coming forward. One of the other things we hope will happen is that it will serve as a mentoring program, but it will also serve as a feeder system into the membership for PRAM. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Bonnie. I think that program will be great. I know I'm in education. I know we have several of us, on the, well, not only on the board, but also in the chapter that are in education. And even if you're not, I know it's just helpful to be able to help these students. And like Bonnie was saying, not only will this be a way to help them as they try to figure out navigate their future careers in public relations, but also a way for us to find, they might need the best great intern that somebody in the chapter is looking for, and someone that eventually become a full-fledged PR professional and another member with us. So thank you, Bonnie. All right.
Thank you.
Patty Wade, who is over the SPRF conference, I've asked her to give just a few little updates and reminders for y'all about that. So Patty, if you want to share.
I'm also on just audio, so I apologize for that, but I'm happy to share with you about the SPRF conference. It's coming up September 14th and 15th. It is an abbreviated schedule this year. We've shortened it just slightly due to COVID, and we've moved it to a totally virtual conference, which is going to be different for all of us, but also it provides us some opportunities to not only have members who might not could travel who can participate, but also to invite others who are colleagues of ours who may not be members of our organization. So I hope that you will share it with others, and I'll give you some information on that in just a moment. But we are very excited about our speaker lineup, and I'm hoping that all of you will consider registering. We have the price is very different this year as well, so it's more affordable. It is $99 for members and $149 for non-members. And with that $99, you will get all 10 sessions, which will be recorded. So you can use those on demand as you would like to in the future. Also for students, a student can access the conference for $25, and universities and colleges can access it for their entire class at the same rate at $25, and that still gives you the 10 sessions that are recorded that you can use later at any point. I wanted to tell you a little bit about the speakers. We're very excited to have Natalie Allen, who is an anchor with CNN International, and she studied at the University of Southern Mississippi. She's from Memphis, but she's now in Atlanta, and she's going to be talking about current events and working with the media. She's doing 2 sessions. And we have Lynn Apgar, who is with LSU. He was formerly, though, an editor of the Wall Street Journal. So again, he's a very experienced individual, and he's going to be talking about detecting fake news. We have Jim Painter, who is a registered dietitian and nutritionist, and he's going to be speaking about staying healthy in a career in PR. So he'll talk about stress and eating, and he also is doing a secondary session on mental clarity, which I think all of us, certainly can appreciate. So, and we have to have that in our jobs. So another important session, a lady named Natalie Gillard is going to be talking about structural inequality, and we're looking forward to what she has to tell us. Brittany Dykes from the Hattiesburg area is going to be talking about social media planning. And then Andy Likes is an Emmy award-winning television producer who's also now working for an agency, and he's going to be speaking to the group. So we have 10 sessions. Those are the speakers. Some really good lineup for us. We will be using an app called Hoover to offer this to members. So you would be able to go into Hoover. You can download the app, go into Hoover, create your own agenda, with the breakout sessions as you want them. You can participate in chats. There'll be messages throughout the conference coming to you. So you can really kind of make it what you want, but in the end, you will still have access to all 10 sessions. So if you're at your office and you can only watch one session that day, you're not losing out. You can access the others. I would like to ask everybody to go to the website sprf.org and register. We'd love for you to go ahead and register. And then also, if you would go to the SPRF Facebook page and share that, I think we could reach more of our colleagues if we all would share the information. I think it really, as I said earlier, it gives us an opportunity to really promote PRAM State, and the other organizations in SPRF to other members. We might actually get new members as a result of this because we can offer it in this way. So thank you for giving me a minute to share. And if Mary Margaret, if you want me to answer any questions, I can do that as well.
Okay. Thank you, Patty. Does anybody have any questions for her about SPRF conference? Anything? All right, and I put the link in the chat that takes you to the page directly where you can register for the conference as well.
Thank you.
So if y'all want to even copy and paste that, save that for later, open another tab. So, all right, thank you so much. All right, do we have any members who would like to make any announcements? Anybody? Floor is open. All right. If nobody has anything, I'm going to turn it over to our Vice President of Programs, Bill Moak, to introduce our speaker.
Thank you, Mary Margaret. We are proud to be in our classroom today. We have several students you can see maybe behind me. I'll get out of the way in just a minute. But it is my pleasure to introduce a good friend of PRAM and many of ours, Reagan Lauritzen, APR M. Reagan serves as the Director of Public Affairs for the U.S. Army's Engineer Research and Development Center, or ERDIC, headquartered in Vicksburg. She joined the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers Public Affairs Community in May 2017, and she served as the Public Affairs Chief for the U.S. ACE Army Corps of Engineers Vicksburg District, Mississippi Valley Division, and the Mississippi River Commission before moving to her current position at ERDIC. A native of Morgan City, Louisiana, Reagan graduated from Tulane in New Orleans with a Bachelor of Liberal Arts in International Relations. She also holds a master's degree in communication from San Diego State University, is a graduate of the Naval War College, and is an honor graduate of the Defense Information School in Fort Meade, Maryland. Reagan earned the professional title of Accredited in Public Relations M, a credential recognized by the UAB, the Universal Accreditation Board, the Department of Defense, and the Public Relations Society of America. She serves as a mentor for other public relations practitioners who are interested in pursuing the APR or the APR M. And she has been a member of the River City chapter of PRAM since moving to Vicksburg in 2016 and currently serves as the chapter president. And I might say that Reagan has been a big proponent of earning the APR credential, and we're happy to have her with us today.
Thanks, Bill. Sorry it took me a while to find the mute button. So, thank you for inviting me today. When Bill originally asked me to speak, I debated as to how I should focus my remarks. With 14 years of experience in public affairs, it was hard to narrow down what would be valuable for this group and what wouldn't be boring in this virtual environment. So knowing that many of you may be interested in pursuing the accreditation in public relations or the APR plus M, I thought I could give some examples of different communication endeavors that I've managed throughout my career and their relation to the 4-step communication planning process. I was hoping to make this a little bit more interactive, but Zoom makes that a bit more challenging. So if you have any questions or thoughts, just throw them up on chat and I'll do my best to multitask. I can't say I'm the best at that with Zoom, but I'll do my best. And then I'm going to try to go ahead and share my screen to get started. Let's see. I don't know if a setting has to be disabled to share it.
Okay, I just made you the host, so see if
Okay. Let's see. Okay. Okay. Y'all see that?
Yep.
Okay, so this is the first time I'm doing. I thought it would be appropriate to kind of start from my beginning, and I know this is a bizarre picture to start with, but before I kind of wanted to roll into what I was going to talk about, I wanted to kind of give you an idea of who I am and where I'm from. So I thought what better way to start this off than a picture of Santa with 8 gators on a shrimp boat. And so this is from my hometown. I'm from Morgan City, Louisiana, which is home to the Shrimp and Petroleum Festival. And so grew up there, spent 19 years there, and then was eager to get out of Cajun country. And I suppose the marketing efforts of the Navy worked effectively with me. I graduated high school and I joined the Navy to see the world, and got trained through Navy ROTC, Navy Reserve Officer Training Corps at Tulane University, and then got commissioned. And so it's fairly ironic because I couldn't wait to leave small town, left, spent 10 years in different areas, and then now I'm back in the same region in a small town living in Vicksburg. So I just thought I'd share that for all of you who have interests elsewhere. You may end up back in this area one day and be able to bring your experience to the region. So the examples that I want to share with you today are from my public affairs career, starting in the Navy, but also encompassing uniform service in the Air National Guard and the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers as a government civilian employee. From preparing national level communication strategies at the Pentagon, to communicating flood conditions in the Yazoo backwater area, to coordinating distinguished visitor flights and tours of the C-17 at the 172nd Airlift Wing, I've had the opportunity to communicate at the tactical, operational, and strategic level. And while my experience mostly resides in the Department of Defense, I think most of the work that I've done translates to the private sector. So I wanted to talk, the reason I picked the communication planning process is knowing that if you're interested in pursuing the APR, I know that at least 33% of the examination that you would take, that's similar to any exam you would take on a computer-based exam like the GRE, 33% of that test is based on this process. So it's very important that you become familiar with it. And not only that, but it really is the bread and butter of what we do in communication. And so without this process, we invest energy and time toward communicating, but we don't necessarily do so in a way that is effective and or efficient in changing audiences' knowledge, their attitude or behavior. And I know that this has inadvertently happened to me in my career when supervisors and managers have had ideas and have suggested that maybe taking a different approach, whether it's slapping something on social media or making a booklet, it's not really research-based, that we react. And it's really incumbent upon us as professionals to explain the value of the process so that knee-jerk tasking doesn't have an impact on communication goals and doesn't influence our ability to communicate effectively. And so even if we aren't outlining elaborate 20 pages, of communication planning documents, for each communication endeavor that we pursue, we need to be thinking about communication in this manner, in this process. And so the 4 steps of the planning process are research, planning, implementation, and evaluation. And so I'm going to start by talking about research. Research is the foundation of communication planning. It's how we better understand the challenge and the audiences that we need to address that challenge. This is also where we identify strengths, weaknesses, threats, and develop a real understanding of the problem at hand. From my experience, thorough research and evaluation are the steps in the process that tend to be gapped, whether that's because of manning, time commitment, funding. It's just where we tend to let up in the process, where we could tend to do better. And so this is why I think it's really important to understand that there are tangible ways to conduct research without extreme investments. Whether pulling analytics from a social media platform, monitoring the type and tone of calls received by your office, your public relations firm, or your public affairs office, investigating secondary research sources, or paying a research entity to conduct in-depth surveys or focus groups. There are benefits to all of these approaches. We have to remind ourselves not to limit our ability to fully understand a situation simply by dismissing the step of research. And so I thought a great example from my experience is a program that I was involved in with the Navy called Navy Weeks or Fleet Weeks, and it's part of the Navy's outreach program. And the program is designed to really touch areas throughout the country that don't have a lot of interaction with the Navy. So we're talking middle America that's not on the coast, and we're also talking just areas that may not necessarily have a Navy presence. And so, you know, the Navy every year goes out and they publish a list of cities where these outreach events are going to transpire. And they usually target areas that, like I said, are middle America, or there's big events that are already planned that the Navy can go and tie into and leverage engagements that are already planned and people and leverage those big crowds to talk about communication and the Navy's mission. And so I brought this up because while I was at the Pentagon, the Navy really took a big approach on research and funded a Gallup research study to look at how effective these engagements were. You know, because as everyone knows, when it comes to funding, sometimes there's questions of what is the value, what's the value added. And so the Navy really had an opportunity for the first time, due to the challenge of not being able to necessarily go out and survey the public. We're a little bit more restricted in that capacity because, you know, because people don't want Big Brother surveying them all the time, so we've got to get surveys approved. So this was a time in my career where we very much did that. And so before I jump to the next slide, I just wanted to kind of call out the photos. The top photo on the left and the bottom two photos are just examples of the type of engagements that can happen in one specific Navy week. And so the top left, this was Albuquerque Navy Week, and it was tied to the that's there that brings you know, thousands of people to Albuquerque every year. And so the Navy had a presence there and was able to, I think there was almost 75 engagements planned involving the Navy band, senior leadership, the Navy's flight demonstration team, and that's the picture on the bottom right. So just a broad scope of engagements where the Navy was able to interact with audiences, educators, students, and then also civic leaders. There were different audiences that we interacted with all these different engagements. And then the top right is actually me. I had the opportunity to go to Sail Boston, and it was an event where, you know, I think I ended up talking to between 2,000 and 3,000 people within a 3-day period on the USS Kearsarge about the Stewards of the Sea program. And it's an environmental conscious program that the Navy has on the ships, and so on some of its ships. And so, you know, this is just an example of how we tie in. Sail Boston was an event where Boston had tall ships coming in, and this was an opportunity to tie into that. So pulling up the next slide, this is just an example of some of the formal research Navy conducted. And while this kind of shows the quantitative data that was collected, there was also qualitative data. So, you know, we took people in a room, and Gallup was with us and asked questions like, what comes to mind when you hear the word Navy? And we heard Old Navy, and we didn't hear US Navy. And so it was just kind of an understanding from this initial Navy week of what people thought about the Navy, their opinion about it. And then we also gave them a test, Gallup did, administer the test, to get a sense of what they understood about Navy assets. And so from this experience, we were able to go in with leadership and say, hey, you know, there might be, from your perspective, the outsider's perspective looking in, value in these other opportunities that are much bigger and more media focused. But for us, these numbers really show the Navy community outreach, the personal engagement that you have with people is incredibly valuable. And so we went to 5 different areas and conducted this research. And then we went back about, I think it was 2 years later, and did the same thing. And we were able to see how we were able to move the needle with these 2 different Navy outreach events in the same areas. And then, you know, that's kind of research. That's when we go and we can pull statistically viable information and present it. But I brought up this slide and wanted to talk about my core experience about informal research. So many of you may be familiar with the flooding that occurred in the Yazoo backwater area. And throughout the experience, you're looking at a crisis situation. So unlike a community outreach event where you have plenty of time to plan, a lot of the research that we did regarding communication for the Yazoo backwater area was really informal, and we were reacting as we were seeing what was transpiring. And so one of the things that we did, we noticed that a lot of the conversation to occur at the beginning of the flood was really about the gates at the steel body control structure were there, and they were preventing water from leaving the Yazoo backwater area, which is absolutely contrary to what they were actually built for. So we thought, how can we visually communicate this? So by getting all these phone calls and observing the dialogue that was happening on Facebook, and just the lack of kind of understanding of what the structures were for, we developed these graphics to help better communicate what they were for. And then further along into the flooding period, photos that the public was posting that caused massive alarm throughout the community. And so we thought there was a need to address that and say, hey, you know, we're seeing all this dialogue about this. We've got questions from media that are alarmed by these images. How can we address this? And so the informal research kind of drew us in to say, okay, let's create this graphic that explains sand boils. And it's a simplified way to show, you know, that sand boils exist. And sometimes they are not something to be alarmed about. And then further on the right hand of the screen, I have examples of how we were getting questions constantly about river stages. So this informal research that we drew us to produce better graphics to communicate and illustrate river stages to folks so that they weren't constantly calling and asking. Not that we didn't have a problem answering them, but we thought this would be a way for them it'll be readily available to them. And we posted this information on social media and our websites, and we continued to, you know, modify the graphics to help communicate those purposes. So it's just, this is supposed to be an illustration of how, you know, the scope of research that you can do. It can be a little bit more formal, funded, based research, or formal research, where there's still benefits to both. And so now I was going to take a minute to talk about planning. And so planning is the part of the the communication planning process where we really identify the overall goal. And we identify our publics, who we're trying to get their knowledge, their attitude, and their behavior to change. And then we identify objectives, and we want to make sure that those objectives are specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and timely. And so that's why I have SMART objectives. That's an acronym. And then we want to have, for every objective, we want to have action strategies and communication strategies. And the action strategies are methods that we take as the organization to make sure that we're able to accomplish our objective. And the communication strategies are really ways that we're messaging to the audience that we're communicating to change behavior, knowledge, or attitudes. And then tactics, it's really the tangible way that we're gonna impact, we're gonna achieve these objectives. So I thought about, okay, what's the best example for this from my career? And so the largest scope of planning, I think, that I've witnessed from a communication perspective really was with what we referred to as the 3-carrier swap. And it's basically, it encompassed thousands of sailors from 3 different aircraft carriers and their families, in a massive situation where we're moving these carriers around to basically make sure that the Navy can continue to meet its mission. And with that, there was a huge communication endeavor. We had audiences of all different scopes because we were talking about all different geographical areas. So when I thought about the goal for this communication plan, it really was maintaining credibility while the transition occurred. And the audiences that we communicated to were the Japanese delegation in the United States, to make sure that they understood that there was going to be a carrier swap with one of our carriers that was in Japan. It was the service members themselves, right? If you're going to one of these carriers and you get the message, you see online that the swap's occurring and you have to report there, there's a whole communication effort to the actual service members to make sure that they understand the scope of what this looks like and how it's going to impact them. And then the local communities in these areas. So we were talking about 3 carriers moving. One's in Japan, one's in Norfolk, Virginia, and then another one's in San Diego. And so these are Navy areas, but when you move carriers, there's an affinity for these titles because the carriers have been there for so long. And so with the case of the Theodore Roosevelt, that was certainly the case. It had been in Virginia for 28 years before making this move. And the real reason this move transpired was because the George Washington had to go refuel, had to do a refueling and overhaul. And so there was a mission requirement that we had to get this done, and we had to make sure it was communicated effectively so that there was, no missteps, and we continue to maintain our credibility. And so the objectives, I'm not going to go into detail on every single objective, but I can tell you that this plan was a 96-page document that involved the State Department, the Department of Defense, the embassy in Japan. It was a very large scoped communication plan. And so I was involved with it while I was at Naval Air Forces in San Diego. And so I think that, at least from my standpoint, the importance of what we were doing was really felt, when I drove over the bridge every day to Coronado, of what we were trying to communicate. We had 3 aircraft carriers in Coronado at one time. So traffic was extensive compared to what it was prior to that. So the Navy created all these graphics to try to help promote an understanding of what was transpiring and to make sure that people understood that even though these swaps were happening, we were continuing to maintain our presence in all 3 locations. And it took initiative with a variety of different audiences to make sure that there were no hiccups. And this was an endeavor that lasted months because one ship came over and did a swap in San Diego, and then that ship left and had to go to Norfolk and did a swap with the crews there. And all the while, the families, they're moving to these new locations where their sailors are. So the planning involved with this was very extensive. And I will say that, thinking about the RPIE process, one of the areas that we certainly could do better, or could have done better, was the evaluation of how we did with this. But as far as the planning, the scope of what we put together for this, it was pretty elaborate. And so then that takes us to implementation. And so this is really where we look at tasks. We've got an implementation matrix. It outlines who's responsible for what tasks and the timeline and all of those things. And like I said, when I first started. I think this is where in public affairs and really in public relations, I'm sure it translates to the private sector, we tend to be really strong with this aspect of the planning process because it's very tangible. So I don't want to take too long to talk about this. I brought up a screenshot just of what 1 week of Navy weeks. This was the Albuquerque Navy Week calendar. This isn't exactly an implementation plan, but it just gives you each of these events on this calendar have their own sort of objectives, have their own matrices to make sure that their communication, that every event was handled. So it just kind of gives you a scope of what implementation could look like for a broad project like this, or perhaps the 3-carrier swap. And so I'm going to move on to evaluation. And like I said before, I think this is where we tend to struggle in public affairs and in public relations, because sometimes it's not as tangible to collect information about how an audience has changed their behavior, or how their understanding has changed, or their attitude has changed. And so what I was going to talk about is the Quicken Loans Carrier Classic. So I was involved with this when I was at the Pentagon, and basically this was an event where we had the opportunity to host an NCAA basketball game on an aircraft carrier in San Diego. Huge event. President Obama attended, the Secretary of the Navy, Ray Mabus, was there, former governor of Mississippi. It was televised on ESPN, and we just had all this attention from this game that was going to be watched by, and it coincided with Veterans Day weekend as well. So it was an opportunity to highlight Veterans Day and service, as well as really, push an understanding to a national audience of the Navy's mission. And so throughout the game, ESPN allowed us to basically work with them, and they told the story of the Navy within the breaks in the game. And we also had the opportunity to enlist sailors in the middle of the game, so the public was able to be a part of this event that is usually, sometimes it doesn't get that much visibility. So I brought this up because evaluation was something that I thought that we did a pretty good job with Carrier Classic, because this event happens, and then we did a good job of some of the coverage on social media. But we also, and I unfortunately didn't have slides from the Gallup poll, but Gallup also went out, and after we did the Carrier Classic and had this national level event, we pulled data to talk about, hey, this is the data that we got from social media. And while that doesn't necessarily show a change in the audience's understanding of the Navy, then we were able to tell Gallup, hey, when you go out and go to the Navy Week events, ask these folks about Carrier Classic. Did they watch it? What did they learn from it? And that kind of helped us to get some more information about how Carrier Classic was effective or not. And while we found that the Navy Week engagements, that personal engagement was so valuable, we still saw understanding improve with audiences with the Carrier Classic engagement. I mean, this is just some other coverage that occurred from that engagement. And so the other thing that I wanted to talk about with evaluation is much more tangible in how we can evaluate ourselves. And so I think times public relations offices, public affairs offices, we send out information, and then we either gather analytics from social media, or we're like, how do we see if our messaging was effective and it resonated? So with the Navy's response to Hurricane Irma, we took the approach of basically taking the Navy's original, all their releases on this event, all their press releases, and we looked at what the messaging was that we were trying to get across. And so our objective in doing this was try to see if media, we wanted them to pick up the same language that we were putting out so that we could make the assumption that that language would resonate with an audience. So we're still having to make an assumption that the understanding is going to translate to an audience, but at least this was a way to evaluate how effective our messaging was in being picked up by the press. And so what we did was look at our coverage of engagement after Hurricane Irma, our support, our response to that effort. I had several people on my public affairs team at the time. They basically had to code articles and say, okay, what is the tone of this article? We all took a baseline assessment and coded one single article, and if we all came out the same way on that, we could say that we were statistically the same on coding. We coded things the same, we all checked out, and we were going to be, our quality check would be the same on future articles. And so we looked at coverage throughout the area, and we coded all the articles. And so we had different people do this. And then we came back and said, okay, on this date, the articles were neutral tone, they were positive, or they were negative. And this allowed us to go back to our leadership and basically say, okay, this is how we did with communicating Hurricane Irma. This might be how we could do better because these messages didn't resonate as well. And, you know, kind of lining that up. And so this is a very tangible way to do evaluation. We did with about 5 people on my team, and it just took the coding of articles. And while there's a time commitment, it really helped us to have these graphics and communicate to leadership how our messages resonated with the press for different parts of our releases to get picked up. And so that's just an example of another evaluation method. And so I didn't want to, I kind of, like I said, was conflicted about what to talk about today because, you know, I will say that a lot of my experience in the military is very crisis communication based. I would say, unfortunately, I've had a lot of experience with loss of life and mishaps, and the huge responsibility that comes with that to make sure that the trust in the public is still with, you know, with the Navy, with the Corps of Engineers, with the Air Guard, when anything like that transpires. And so that's a whole other discussion. But I mentioned that because in addition to kind of the planning process, I just want to make sure that I make myself available to anybody who's interested in pursuing the APR or just interested in talking about my experience and anything I could offer to your career. I think PRAM's been incredibly valuable to me, even though I've moved around a lot, because it's given me contacts all across the country that I certainly reach out to, and I've gained things from, you know, other ways, other approaches that people have responded to communication challenges. And so I still stay in touch with the professors that taught me in grad school, and you know, I still am in contact with the people that were on my board when I sat my accreditation and public relations board. So I just encourage you to, you know, take my contact information, and if there's anything that I can do to help you throughout your career, just serve as, you know, somebody to bounce things off of, I'm happy to do that. So with that, I wanted to open it up to questions. I have done an awful job at looking at the chat, so I'll try to do that now if any questions were asked.
Does anybody have anything for Reagan? Anybody? Y'all feel free to unmute yourselves if there's questions, comments, anything y'all want to add.
Thank you for the thoughtful comments on chat. And I guess if there's no questions, you know, again, don't hesitate to reach out to me. I've been doing this for 14 years now, and I still learn something new every day. And I think being one of those people that can kind of, you know, just kind of learn from other people's experiences, just that's what you got to do to be able to adapt to the changing environment.
Thank you so much, Reagan. That was great. And I think this was probably the best time for these educators to have students on here because you did a great job of laying out the RPIE process. I know they appreciate that for their students and, you know, showing how that actually plays out in your career. So thank you so much. All right. So just a closing. Y'all please remember, as Patty said, SPRF is September 14th and 15th virtually. Again, that registration link is in the chat here. Y'all make sure to get Reagan's information. If you would like to reach out to her, we appreciate you making yourself available in that way. Y'all really take advantage of the resources of PRAM. That's what we're here for everyone to grow both professionally and personally. So you know, really take advantage of these resources and make the most of it. Our next meeting will be September 23rd. We'll have Paula Padine, and she will be speaking on ethics. September is actually Ethics Month for Public Relations, so we'll get y'all some more information about that. All right, does anybody have anything? Last chance. Okay. Well, if not, thank you again, Reagan. Awesome job. And thank you all for joining us today. I look forward to seeing y'all next time.